This next speaker, you know, I'm really fortunate that I get to meet you all, and I get to meet some really special people. Our next keynote speaker, he's changed the world in multiple ways. One of the first things he went out and did was he co-founded a company called Siri, which sold to Apple and became Siri. He then went on to co-found Change.org. How many of us have done a Change.org donation or signed up for a Change.org? He co-founded that, changed the world. Then he went and started Viv Labs, which then sold to Samsung and is now the engine behind Samsung Bixby. He is also a magician, and he shared a great story with me that he trained his niece, who is going to be on Penn and Teller's full Penn and Teller pretty soon. So this guy changes the world. I want to bring up and give a huge round of applause for Adam Cheyer with Samsung. Thank you, Adam. Come on up.
Hello. Welcome. So I'm here today to tell you about Samsung's Bixby, really the newest conversational assistant kid on the block. I think this assistant brings a lot of new ideas about what the experience should be like for end users, about what the experience should be like for developers, and I think it brings a lot of new opportunities with the new Samsung Bixby marketplace. So let's take a step back. I've been in this game for a long, long time. My first conversational assistant was in 1993 before I saw a web browser. And with this perspective of longevity, I realized that every 10 years, the way people interact with computers changes. So if you go back to the mid-'80s, boom, a PC dropped on everyone's desk, and everyone had to learn about Windows and a mouse. Just about 10 years later, you know what's coming, a web browser emerged, and now we had to know what URL and HTTP stood for, and bookmarks, etc. 10 years later, almost like clockwork, the app and the mobile revolution took off. So it was all about pinch and zoom and downloading. And I don't know if anyone's been counting, but last year was the 10th anniversary of the App Store. So that means the time is now for a new paradigm as important as the web and mobile. And of course, I think most people in this room would say, we think that paradigm will be the conversational assistant. Now, I know a lot of you are thinking, oh man, is it time to learn a whole new paradigm? You know, why do I need a new paradigm? I'm pretty happy with what I've got. Right? I get a lot done with web browsers and smartphones. Well, new paradigms bring computing to new context. So if you think about it, in the desktop revolution, all the computing you could do had to reside on that computer on the desk. When you moved to the internet, now you could use computing on computers around the world. And when mobile came out, you could now do computing instead of sitting at your desk. You could do it from a park bench or walking down the street like this, clicking and bumping into people. And so the voice assistant also takes us into new contexts, contexts where a smartphone and a web browser are not appropriate. So there are many. I'll give you a few. So maybe you're jogging with your smartwatch, hard to do with a web browser. Maybe you're driving in your car. I hope you're not using an app or even that giant Tesla screen to be dealing with web browsers and apps during that time. Maybe you're in your home dealing with your family and cooking a meal or washing dishes or just being around them. In all of these moments, having a web browser or a smartphone are not conducive to good behavior, to good experience. But a conversational assistant that can understand you, that knows your preferences, and that can help you get tasks done, those are appropriate. And those are some of the reasons about why an assistant will be important as a new paradigm. And I'm a founder, so I tend to talk about big proclamations, but I believe if done right, the conversational assistant will be more important than the web and mobile. And people go, what? That's crazy. But think about it, a lot of what we do are tasks. And if you were had the biggest screen and the fastest keyboard, and you were trying to plan a trip to your sister's wedding next month, you'd have to go to site after site to figure out how do you get there, where do you stay, what do you do, what do I bring as a gift? Too complicated to be entering in information over and over again, but an assistant over time can start to smooth out all of those transactions for you. So with that, the question is, why aren't assistants important today at the scale of the web browser or mobile, a paradigm? And I'm the first to say they're not. Billions of requests are flowing through assistants today. We should be proud of that. But if I were to say, I'm going to take away your web browser for a week, you're not allowed to use your smartphone for a week, you'd be like, I can't live my life. If I'm going to say you cannot use a conversational assistant for a week, you'd be like, all right, that's inconvenient. We're not at that level. And the question is, why not? What will it take to get there? What do we need to elevate from a utility, which is where we are today, to a paradigm? And so we've defined 4 criteria that all of us in this room should be striving towards to achieve importance at a paradigm scale. So number 1 assistant. As an end user, I do not want 80,000 different assistants. Conceptually, of course I want 80,000 different things by different brands, by different companies with lots of knowledge. But that's too much for my little head to keep track of. If I have to say, ask app 7 to do command 5, and every single experience is kind of fragmented and works in a different way and really feels different, it's too much. Conceptually, we need to get to a point where, like a browser, like a smartphone, there are concepts that people know how to use and expect, and you have a consistent experience, even though websites or apps are created by millions of developers. We need that kind of experience within an assistant. The second is, we want this assistant experience to be available across every device. That means it should be cloud-based in the form where it's not embedded in a device. A device is a context through which I talk to this assistant. Again, I don't want to have to say, oh, what does the car assistant know about me as opposed to the refrigerator assistant? It's too much work. I want one assistant, and a device is a context. It's important because if I say to Bixby, for instance, through my TV, what's going on tonight, maybe an appropriate response is, oh, here's a good show to watch. And if I say it on a phone or a speaker, oh, there's this concert going on down the street. So there is context, but it should be one assistant across every device. The third point is we need to make this powered by every service. Today, if you look at analytics, most of the traffic is going to the built-in services that come out of the box with the major assistants, right? And very little traffic is going to the ecosystem of third-party services. We have to flip that game. And if I were to say, when we talk about Bixby later, what's the one thing that Bixby is trying to do more than any other assistant? It's that it's about the developer services. I say down the hallways of Samsung, we are not trying to build the world's best assistant. We are enabling the world to build the best assistant. So we're going to talk about that, but one of the examples is level playing field. With our Bixby system, we're going to give you the exact same tools, the exact same platform to every developer. That is not the case in most of the other assistants on the market. So you need to be able to have full, complete capabilities to develop services that can compete against each other and any service that Samsung provides. And finally, personalized just for you. What is more important than a personal assistant than personalization? Today, assistants out of the box are pretty much the same for every single user. But think about the mobile experience. In mobile, your surface area is defined by the apps that you download, and it's quite different from user to user. There's only maybe 10% overlap. We all use email and a browser, but the apps you use define your experience and the surface area, and we're aspiring to head that way so that every assistant can have their own definition about what are the things you want to do, what are the brands that you know and trust. So with this in mind, we've worked for a number of years, first at Viv Labs, which will now power the technology, to create a new platform and tool set, an ecosystem, to power a scalable marketplace, a scalable experience for developers. And so we'll tell you a little bit about Bixby. So Bixby is a conversational assistant. It's available today on many phones and TVs and refrigerators from Samsung, and coming out on far more than that. Across this is a little bit of the experience. So you can just ask what you want to do. What are the top events here in Los Angeles tonight? The next thing is you get beautiful results. So we are voice first, but we can leverage a screen at a level that most other assistants don't do. We have very rich components and experiences. One of the things is you get curated lists. So we don't want to return 100 results. An assistant, and it's hard to see here, but should say, based on your preferences, I think this is the event for you. Here's the most popular, here's trending now. We want to smooth out the flow to getting a task done. And then finally, accelerated task completion. So in this events and Ticketmaster example, you can complete a transaction end-to-end through voice, all the way through to buying the ticket, choosing your seat. We have integration with Samsung Payment Service. So if you receive credit cards, we lower the friction to getting this done for any of your services. And I'm going to give you a quick demonstration of the Bixby experience today.
Welcome to the new Bixby. Bixby is an assistant that can help you get things done based upon services. These services are extendable and configurable using a marketplace. Let's look up some information using Bixby. Will it be warmer than 60 degrees near the Golden Gate Bridge the day after tomorrow? Great, I've got some great weather information. Find me a pasta recipe with shrimp and asparagus for 4 people. And I can see my recipe, the ingredients here, and preparation steps. That looks great. Bixby can also be used to accomplish tasks such as making reservations, buying tickets, booking a ride, and more. Find a French restaurant in San Francisco. And Bixby has highlighted certain picks based upon what is learned about my preferences. If you want to see more results, you can simply scroll down. But you know, instead of French, I feel like Italian. Make a reservation for 2 people at an Italian restaurant instead. And I can see several Italian restaurants. Siena Bistro. That sounds good. Reserve this one. And I go ahead and make that reservation, but I also need an Uber there. Get an Uber to Siena Bistro. And I can see I can get an Uber to Siena Bistro as well.
So I'm going to, there's more, but you get the basic idea. What you're seeing is not any of the particular functionality, but a very rich, consistent experience that's conversational, that's multimodal, meaning you can talk to answer any question, you can click at any time, and that's maintaining the conversational state all the way through. And whatever service or content you have as a developer, you can leverage all of that and build experiences like that today. So what's the attraction for developers? One, obviously, is Samsung has the most devices of any manufacturer out on the market with a deploy base of over 1 billion devices, something like 500 million new devices are shipped every year. And Samsung has committed by 2020 that all of the devices they ship will be connected, and they're putting their weight behind Bixby as their intelligent interface platform. As you'll see, when you build for Bixby, you'll build one capsule. We call them capsules instead of skills or actions. And that capsule will work across devices, and you can localize it, that same capsule, across languages and markets. So let's talk a little bit about the technology for developers behind Bixby. And this is radically different. This is completely different than any other technology stack or tool set you'll find on the marketplace. Last November, we launched something called Bixby Developer Studio. It's a full-featured downloadable IDE, and it's based on a completely different principle of software development. So just quickly, if you think about it, for decades, the relationship between a human developer and a machine went like this. I'm the human, here's the code, you run the code. I'm going to tell you what to do. Then along came neural nets and deep learning, very different behavior. A developer would say, here are examples. If I give you this input, I want that output. And it's the AI that came up with the code, the logic, to generate that function. But humans couldn't even understand it, right? It was just a mess of neural networks filled with numbers connected to each other. So what Bixby Developer Studio puts out is a completely new paradigm for programming, where a human and an AI sit side by side to build every use case handled by your assistants. And we do that using what we call dynamic program generation. So the way it works is, as a developer, you will specify the objects and the functions or APIs that you have in the world at a micro level, right? Micro meaning it's not weather at Boston. You don't do weather at a city. You'll say, I'm a weather object and I take a lat long. And that way, if I said, what's the weather at my sister's house? What's the weather at the Super Bowl? What's the weather in Kentucky? The weather program doesn't have to have access to the contacts of my sister or look up Super Bowl information. It's just taking a lat long. And Bixby's AI will write a program that sequences calls to many different services required to get your job done. You can now experience this in full going to bixby.developer.samsung.com. I'll pause so you can write that down or take pictures. You'll be able to download what I'm going to show you now. So first, when you get there, you'll arrive at the Bixby Developer Center. That's where you get our IDE, available for Windows, Mac, and this is an old slide now for Linux. You can join the community, read all of our great documentation, sample capsules, videos. This is what the Bixby Developer Studio looks like. So it's a full-fledged IDE that you run. And now I'm going to give you a very quick walkthrough just to give you the idea of what it's like to interact. So you build using capsules. And the capsule we're going to load is called Space Resorts. It's one of our samples that you can download. So if you can't see it, go download it and see it later. In Space Resorts, you build the objects. So for instance, a space resort, kind of like a futuristic hotel, is a structure with many properties. It's got a name, it's the planet that it's on, it's got attributes or amenities. And you could have an action like finding space resorts by what planet they're on or different search criteria. And we have different types of actions. So search actions have no side effects, but we have full transactional support. There's many types of actions you can define in this way. You then hook up a little bit of code that could be a wrapper to call your web service or to access your data behind that definition. And now here's where the magic happens. Once you've defined your objects and your actions in the world, you're now ready to build a use case with Bixby's AI. So here I'm typing in a request. Make a reservation for 2 people at a space resort on Mars with an oxygen bar. Of course, that's what you'd want to do for a space resort. And what you do to write this use case is I say the goal is that I want to actually get, basically, I want a reservation, an order to be created. So you say, what's the end state? And then I tag the inputs. Mars is a planet, and oxygen bar is a search criteria. These are the types that you've defined in your model. 2 people, that's the number of astronauts I need to bring along with me. And as soon as you hit save, what Bixby does is instantly writes a program, a dynamically generated program, that will involve all of the calls, take all of the APIs and objects you've defined, and all of the user interactions. So if you need to prompt the user or get some response and then learn from those interactions, that's done automatically. That's it. You hit compile, you bring up, you'll have to do some more training examples, of course, but the code gets generated for each. Here I bring up a simulator. I say, get me a reservation for 3 people at a resort on Jupiter with orbital zip lining, of course. It says, which space resort would you like? I'm looking at Europa's Jewel. I can scroll through the rich set of components that I have. I now decide to book it. We have a rich date picker. Now I can always use GUI, or I can use language at any point of time in the experience. I'll say the weekend of Christmas 2027. There must be space resorts on Jupiter by then. Now it's asking which room would you like, honeymoon or the lab. And every time Bixby asks a question, the user will know that it will learn from those. So if I go with 2 people, I want the fancy romantic suite, etc. Here is the actual debugger where you can see all of the code that was generated by Bixby. You can step through it, see what dialogues are created, and you can refine those dialogues, refine the layouts, etc. So it's a very different process where you're writing some of the code and Bixby's AI is writing some of the code. So please go to bixbydevelopers.com or the other URL, which is longer and harder to remember, and download this and give it a try. So with that, I'm going to close about announcing that the tools have been available since November, but we have just launched the Bixby Marketplace. So now any developer here for any service that you want can create a new capsule in the manner that I showed, deploy it to the marketplace, and start to have your services discovered and accessed by the huge numbers of users available on Samsung devices. One point, we are new, and that is an opportunity. There are not 100,000 capsules ahead of you in line. It is a new and blossoming marketplace. And so this is an opportunity to get in early on the ground floor. And as new users are rolling out, Bixby's coming to new users every day, they're going to want to see what's good, what's cool. This is an opportunity for you to get there and sell your services. Many people ask, what's the marketplace like and how does discovery work? I'm going to give you a quick demonstration of that, and then I'll close.
Let's take a look at how the new Bixby Marketplace works. To launch the marketplace, open Bixby and swipe right. And here you can see the marketplace. You can scroll down and you can see there's trending capsules, staff picks, and then a list of popular categories. Let's view all of the categories. And you know, I am interested in rideshare, so let's see what's under travel and transportation. Oh, that's amazing. Both Lyft and Uber are available. So let me go to Lyft, and I'm going to add that to Bixby. And then let me go to Uber, and I'm going to add that to Bixby. And now I've added both Uber and Lyft to Bixby. Okay, now I need a ride to the airport. Let's try. Hi, Bixby. I need a ride to the airport.
Which service do you want to use?
And because I enabled both Lyft and Uber, Bixby is asking me which one I want to use. For today, let's use Uber. Uber.
An UberX car to San Francisco at the airport. San Francisco will be about $48. The closest driver is 2 minutes away. Ready to book your ride?
So now I can book my ride on Uber. Now, as you notice, Bixby asked me, do I want to use Uber or Lyft. Let's say I have a preferred ride-sharing company. How do I set that? Let's go see. So go back to here, and I go into my Bixby settings, and I go down to preferred capsules. And as you can see at rideshare at the bottom, it says always ask, but I could set it to Uber, or I could set it to Lyft. Now that I've set it to Lyft, let's try that again. Hi Bixby, I need a ride at the airport.
Where would you like to get dropped off?
And you can see it automatically launched Lyft. So I've made Lyft my default rideshare application. But if I want to take an Uber, I just ask for it. Get me an Uber to the airport. And voila, you can see Uber comes up and I can book my Uber ride.
So that gives you an idea how we're approaching the marketplace. It's extensible across many categories. It's integrated right into the flow. If you say, get me a ride to the airport, and it says you don't have any rideshare providers, it will show you options from the marketplace. User choice is king, so they get to set preferred, or they can just leave it open if they have multiple, and it'll ask every time. So that's an introduction to the newly launched Bixby marketplace. So with that, I hopefully brought some new ideas with the new Bixby to you. Please come to our Bixby booth. We'll be available to answer any questions you have. I think there's some amazing ideas to learn from on the future of voice, and I think huge opportunity for you all to create voice experiences for Bixby. Thank you.
All right.